Okay, everybody, welcome to the Soapbox. This is the place where people who work and help in recovery can get up on their soapbox and share what's really important to them. And today, my guest, and happy to have her here, is Julie Miller. She's a personal recovery coach and the host, a co-host of the Through the Glass Recovery podcast. Hello, Julie. How are you?
Hi.
It's
Good.
nice.
Thank you so much for having
It
me.
is nice to have you. Um, I want to start off the podcast by letting you take the spotlight. Give us me and our guest a real quick Cliff Notes version of who you are and what you're about. Tell me.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Julie Miller, and I live in a tiny little town in Western Colorado. I'm
Okay.
married. I've got two daughters. One is an adult and has moved out. The other one is 16. So I've homeschooled both my kids their whole lives.
Mhm.
And we live on a small farm. So we have about 40 acres. We have horses and beef cows and dairy
Okay.
goats and chickens and turkeys and
Okay.
all of that. And so that's a little bit about me. I am, like as you said, I'm a recovery coach.
Okay.
So I work virtually and I help people quit drinking. I do work with people who are trying to quit drugs as well. Alcohol
Okay.
tends to be what I focus on because that's where my personal story
Okay.
um, is. And so, yeah, that's what I do. And then, like you said, also I'm a podcast host, so I co-host Through the Glass Recovery podcast, and we talk about all kinds of things related to recovery.
Okay. I just want to let everybody truth and discovery. I was fortunate enough to be a guest on your podcast a couple of weeks ago or last week or so, and I really appreciated that. I was telling some people that I knew. I said, you know what? Under the circumstances, they really didn't have to have me. That was very gracious of them to let me come on and share with them. That I appreciated that very much.
Oh, it was
So,
a great conversation. You had so much good to contribute. I'm really glad that you came and that we got to
oh,
meet you.
thank you very much. Before we go on, it's always time for a commercial. This episode is brought to you by Second Starts, helping complete family and support networks of young adults in recovery, making therapy work better by strengthening the support network and installing a permanent self-refueling transformation that works for the family, the client, and the helping professionals. And more about that in the description as we go on. And after we'll set the description up and tell you more about Julie and myself. And I also want to say that this episode will be viewed on my YouTube channel, Second Starts, that's number two, NDSTARTS.com, uh, the YouTube channel. And we also have a new Facebook group that we're starting called Parenting Your Child in Recovery. So that'll be on Facebook. And we also have a sister podcast that will go with that. So, and we're also on LinkedIn. Don't forget that too. So, Julie, before we do anything else, let's get you a chance to get up on your soapbox. And I want to ask you a few things that you've talked to me about briefly, and I want you to describe how you feel about those things and give me your point of view. And really, we want to hear Julie on this. Okay. First thing is ending the stigma of alcoholism. How do you feel about that? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so when we talk about stigma, especially with addiction, with alcoholism, addiction, anything like that, um, basically that means, in general, society looks down
Mhm.
on
Yes.
people who struggle with addiction. And it's seen as like this moral failing, right? That people who become addicted to a substance are somehow morally
Yes.
inferior to the rest of society that doesn't struggle
Right.
with addiction. And that makes me kind of angry.
Okay.
Um, the stigma is absolutely the reason that I didn't get help for so long.
Okay.
And, because that's just, I didn't want to be looked down on. I kept everything so secret because I didn't want anyone to know what I was really dealing with, what I was really struggling with. Um, and, you know, w- we're made to think that becoming addicted is this moral failing. Somebody said something to me once that actually really stood out, and I think it's important.
Okay.
I remember telling her, like, I wish I could just be normal. And she's like, has it ever occurred to you that you are a normal person who got addicted to an addictive substance? Maybe
Right.
you're the normal one. Maybe the people who don't get addicted are the weird ones, because
Okay.
that is literally what alcohol is. It's an addictive substance,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's no wonder so many people get addicted to it. It's nothing to do with with who we are or our character or any of that. And I think the way that we talk about addiction as a society causes a lot of shame for the people who are still dealing with it.
Right.
As soon as you're feeling shame, the first thing you're going to do is try to cover yourself up and cover everything up and hide that with everything you have because you don't want to feel shame. As humans, that's what we do, right? We try
Right.
to avoid feeling shame.
Right. Right.
And so I think it's really important that we understand as a society and as a culture that it's not because we're bad people. It's not because I'm a bad person that I got addicted to alcohol, right? I
Right.
have all this other stuff that I need to work with. It's just that genetically I'm predisposed to addiction. Alcohol found its place in my life, and that's what I used to cope. There are all kinds of coping mechanisms, and a lot of them aren't healthy. Um, but that's what I ended up using, right?
Right.
Um, and I think that even like going to the doctor, even our medical professionals
Yes.
don't really understand addiction. And as soon as you bring up, I'm struggling with drinking too much, I need
Yes.
help, you can feel the vibe in that room change. And that
Yes.
doctor has suddenly brought you down a couple levels. Like you have less respect even from the doctor
Yes.
because that's the thing you're struggling with.
Yes.
And that's all that's going to do is stop people from getting the help that they need.
Exactly. Exactly. So now that further goes into your second point. That's the shame of addiction in itself. It even goes a lot of times with some of the helping professionals, and dependent on which one you get, a lot of
Yes.
people are going to their healthcare provider,
Hmm.
automatically giving him the benefit of trust,
Hmm.
and if he is not uh, aware of the addiction situation, not just his medical treatments, but the personal view of it. If he's not aware, he can come off and really be discouraging for people. And I've had some other doctors talk to me about that and talking to other doctors. That's, you have to be careful how you address people and, how you look at them and how you talk to them. And a lot of times, some of the doctors who have had addiction problems themselves, fortunately or unfortunately for them, it comes in handy at that point because they have a little bit more empathy toward that. So,
That's exactly what it is empathy. It's
mhm.
empathy and compassion, right? As soon as we start looking at somebody with empathy and compassion, then that gives them the space to feel safe, to talk about what it is that they're dealing with, and start exploring options for treatment.
That's
And I think it's just so important. You know, for so many years, I've struggled with mental health all my life, depression, anxiety, things like
mhm.
that. And I remember even as a teenager, I got put on Prozac when I was 14 or 15 years old.
Okay.
And that was the kind of thing you didn't talk about. You did not
Right.
admit that, right? Like the common mental health disorders like depression and anxiety, which
Mhm.
so much of the population deals with, for so long that was something that we were ashamed of. That was something you kept hush hush. You didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah.
And we're finally in a place as a culture where someone can just say out loud, I struggle with depression, and they're not instantly looked down on. They're looked at with compassion and with empathy because as a society, we've changed the way that we view mental health disorders and mental health
Mhm.
struggles. I would love to see the same thing happen with addiction. I would love for a person just in regular conversation be able to say, I'm addicted to alcohol and here's what I've been dealing with.
Right.
The same way that I can go into a girls' night and say, God, my anxiety has just been really bad lately.
Right.
Here's what I'm struggling with. I can't walk into a girls' night and be like, man, I've been craving alcohol lately. And,
Right.
it's just different.
Right.
And I would
Right.
love to see it normalized because I think that's what's going to start saving people.
Yes, I agree 100%. Okay. Let me ask you about this and talk to me about this. Multiple paths to recovery. What's your view on that?
Yeah. So almost anybody, if they're looking for help with addiction, the only thing
Mhm.
they've ever heard of is AA.
Right.
And, for good reason. AA has helped a lot of people.
Mhm.
There's also a lot of people that just don't connect with that program. And so when they go and they try it, and even if they do give it like an honest go and they feel like this isn't working for me, they tend to just give up. And they figure
Right.
this isn't for me. Obviously, I can't get sober. And that's another thing that I think we just need. It just needs to be talked about. There are other programs. There's Smart Recovery. There's Celebrate Recovery. There's Dharma Recovery, or Recovery Dharma. There's all these different programs, but even a program isn't the only way to get sober.
Exactly.
So I didn't use a program at all. I didn't go to any organized, structured meetings or anything like that. Um, I found a group of people online through an app. It's called I Am Sober. I highly recommend that to anybody that's
Okay.
struggling with
All right.
sobriety. But so the I Am Sober app, I got on there, and there's people all just like me that are just dealing with trying to get sober, and they get together on Zoom. And so I ended up connecting with some people online, and that's been the basis and foundation of my recovery. It hasn't been through a structured program. And I think it's important that people understand, especially people who are out there trying to make their way into recovery, trying
Right.
to get sober.
Hmm.
Keep trying things. There's so many options, you
Right.
know? I mean, I'm a recovery coach. That's what I do is I sit down
Okay.
with people and figure out what might help them and, find their barriers to their recovery or their sobriety and uncover them and then solve them. So there's just so many options. And I hate for people to feel
Mhm.
like AA is the only option. And if you go to an AA meeting, very often you'll be told this is the only way to do it. Any other
Yes.
way is never going to work, and
Yes.
this is it. And
Yes.
that makes me crazy because it's so wonderful for some people and
Right.
just not the right fit for others.
Well, as I explained to someone I was talking to, when the AA book is so forceful about what they believe, I say you got to remember something. This was close as 100 years ago when this stuff first started, and at that time, their other options were not anywhere near what they are today. So they did speak forcefully. I said, but you remember, you're reading a very old book. Principles may still work, but it's a very old book. So you have to
Mhm,
be able to flow with it. Now, we have advanced in everything, including our help with addiction.
mhm.
Let me ask you a question. So, in your recovery coaching, do you use or speak with a method, sort of how you uh, worked with your addiction? You said you didn't use a specific method, you kind of just joined a group. Do you transfer some of the thoughts and how you did that to your recovery people, or do you follow a particular type of method? How do you handle that?
I don't follow a specific method because I believe everybody has different needs and
Mhm.
everybody has their own unique journey. Um, for me, and so I generally work with women, and there are very often some similarities between my journey and theirs. For me, there was a big part, lots of undoing perfectionism, undoing the people pleasing, uncovering authenticity, figuring out who I really was, because I had pretended to be everything I thought everybody needed me to be for so long. I didn't know who I was. I had no idea who Julie really was.
Okay.
And so things like that tend to be similar with many of the women that I work with.
Okay.
And so, based on my experiences, and y- really it's all about uncovering where they're at, and asking them questions and helping them discover what it is that's holding them back from staying sober.
Mhm.
And so I can sometimes use my experience to share with them what I've learned. And
Okay.
other times their journey goes a totally different direction. And my
Okay.
job is just to walk alongside them,
Okay.
and be there as, support and empathy and compassion and a little bit of wisdom.
Okay. All right. That's great. Hey, do okay. This is what I want to do now. I want you to talk a little bit about the podcast and enlighten us about what the podcast is about, and what you guys are doing.
Sure. Yeah. So, Through the Glass Recovery podcast, you can
Mhm.
find it on any podcast platform. And then we're also at throughtheglassrecovery.com. So, what we do is we invite two or three people. It's myself and my co host. His name is
Mhm.
Steve. We invite two or three people to join us on a
Okay.
recording, and we host a sort of roundtable discussion style podcast. And so, we'll bring a topic in some way related to
Okay.
recovery and ask everybody to share their thoughts and experiences. And it turns into an amazing discussion every time,
Yes.
with people bringing their own perspectives and their own life experiences to the table. Um, and in doing that, we're hoping that the more voices that we can put to recovery and the more experiences that we can get shared, the more our listeners will realize that they're not alone and they'll hear little tidbits that really resonate with them and give them either ideas to, make some changes or try some new things in their own recovery journeys, or things to self-reflect about, and see if there's things that need to be uncovered. So it's really been just an incredible experience. We have met so many inspiring people. And, we have people on our podcast that have been sober for 30 days. And we
Yeah.
have people on the podcast that have been sober for 30 years. And we have people who aren't sober, but are in some way helping those in recovery. You
Okay.
fell into that category. We've had other people that are the same, that, anybody who understands what recovery is, I think,
Right.
has a place on our podcast.
Okay. I
So,
I listened to it and was fortunate enough to be on it, and I think you guys do a great job. Even in a situation like that where I've talked to people about recovery a lot, when you sit down in a small group like that with a couple of people who are telling their real story, you always can learn something.
mhm,
Every time when people are just speaking like that, you can always learn something.
yeah.
And I found it good. Talking about how people can get in touch with you or you guys, you know, so that somebody might want to get in touch with you and share, you know.
Sure. Yeah. So we are definitely always looking for guests for the podcast, and we are always taking clients for recovery coaching, both
Good.
myself and Steve. So the easiest way to get in touch with us is to email us through theglassrecovery@gmail.com.
Okay.
You can also contact us through the website. And we have a newsletter. It comes out once a week, and we include kind of, the most recent podcast episode. We usually include some journaling questions to help that are related to the episode for that week, and blog posts, other useful tools and information. The other thing I wanted to mention is we host a recovery meeting on Zoom on Monday nights.
Okay.
Um, so at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can get on Zoom and jump on, and jump into a Zoom chat with 15 or 20 other people who are going through the same thing. We divide up it's basically, we're replicating the podcast, right? But just for
Okay.
people in recovery. So everybody shows up, introduce ourselves, and then we divide into small groups of 4 or 5 people and give everybody about half an hour to discuss the topic, for the night. So it's been an amazing opportunity for connection, which I think is a really, really important part of recovery. So yeah,
Definitely.
that's the other little bit of our project is our
Good.
meetings, and they are free. They're for anybody in recovery.
Okay, great, cool. That's good. Listen, let's go off the beat a little bit here. You talked a little bit about some of your personal life, but a couple of these things I want you to just expand on for me. I've been intrigued by this long distance hiking thing. Okay, you
Yeah.
got to tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I never realized I've always loved hiking. It's been something that I've done for many years. And then I started backpacking. So I'd go, 2 or 3 or 4 nights with a friend, and we'd, hike maybe 20 miles over that distance. And then at some point I got inspired to try some long distance hiking. So at every summer I go on a long hike, generally anywhere from 150 to 200 miles.
Wow.
And I carry all my stuff on my back and I go out into the woods. I go alone. That freaks people out, and they're amazed by it. But so fun story with that. I had the very first time I went on a long hike, it was going to be 185 miles. And I went with my friend that has always backpacked with me. And on day one, she bailed. She was just like, I can't do it. I can't do that. It was just too much. And so at that moment, I had to decide, am I going to keep doing this alone, or am I going to quit too? And I wasn't ready to quit yet. I didn't want to give up. So that's how I learned how to hike alone. She quit and I just kept going. And I was so afraid to be alone in my own head for that many days on end. And it turned out to be so healing and so
I
healthy.
can imagine. So wait, when I asked you this, I didn't even know you went alone. That's impressive or scary, either way you want to look at it. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, it's not scary. It doesn't feel scary. It
no.
felt scary the first couple of nights, but now it just feels very
Well,
peaceful.
there is a guy that does an internet thing, and it's basically about a 12-hour walk. Um, I forgot the name of it, but it's a 12-hour walk, and he said it's so great to clear your head. So
Mhm.
your head must be really clear when you get done at 85. 185-mile walk. That's incredible.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really good for me. And it's something I fell into accidentally, the alone part of it. But yeah, it's
Well,
a really important part of my mental health now.
I make a joke, and it's just a joke. You know, you don't get away with jokes too often, but I make a joke to some people, especially the younger people I deal with. If I could take you and put you in the middle of Montana and make you walk back to civilization for 2 weeks alone, I guarantee you I would help you greatly in your recovery. If you had to walk 2 weeks alone and think and be with yourself, the person that you're probably most afraid to be with of anyone. Uh, so this is sort of a take on that, just some
Mhm.
long hiking and get a chance to go over everything with yourself and then go over it again. And then that's great work. Another thing, you talked about this before too, but I got to hear a little bit more about it. The farm. I'm intrigued
Yeah.
by the farm. You've got everything on the farm. You can go.
Yeah, so we my husband and I lived in town when we got married. And at some point, I gardened. I grew a lot of food and vegetables just in our backyard. And then at some point, we got chickens. I wanted to get chickens. And he grew up with animals. I grew up with animals. It wasn't something either of us had tons of experience with, but a little bit.
Right.
So, anyway, we got chickens. And I always say chickens are the gateway drug to farming. And
Okay.
so eventually we moved up into the mountains. We bought 40 acres, and it's very fulfilling to produce your own food.
Wow.
We produce our own beef, we produce our own milk, we produce our own cheese and yogurt and eggs, and so yeah, it's very fulfilling.
That's interesting. Okay. And last piece, your homeschool mom?
I'm a homeschool mom. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I always thought me and my wife had said, after it became a little bit more talked about after our kids were out of school, but we said, what if we had thought about that, it wasn't as popular, but if we had thought about that, that would have been a great idea. We did do it because by the time it started getting a little bit popular, we're done with the children. So,
Hmm.
but I that's impressive, very
Yeah.
impressive. Okay, let's get to the fun part.
Okay.
I was asking you about what your favorite color was, and
Yeah.
I'll spoil it for you and everybody else. You told me green.
Yes.
Okay, I looked it up, and the best I could come up with, the simplest, was down to earth and aware of how the world sees you, and also renewal and abundance. So that
Mhm.
sounds a lot like almost what you've been talking about.
Yeah.
Uh, Did you know that if you liked green, you were called a viridophile?
I have never heard that.
I know, I didn't either. So I thought I had to throw this on the show. Viridophile. Very interesting. I didn't know that people that liked colors had names.
I didn't know
Well,
that either, but that's
I,
great.
I didn't know that either. My second question for you, which I didn't ask you to answer to, what's
Yeah.
your favorite movie?
So I actually really had to think about I don't watch movies very often,
Okay.
but what I came up with is The Breakfast Club.
Oh, Breakfast
Um,
Club. Molly
yeah,
Ringwald.
exactly.
Yes.
Yep, I love those John Hughes, like the Brat Pack movies. I loved
Oh,
those, especially when I was younger.
yes. I'm right with you on that one. Right with you on that one. What about your favorite foods? And now you got a lot of natural foods, and you do a lot of thing with food. So,
It's nothing fancy. I love grilled cheese and tomato soup. It's my
a
favorite food.
classic.
Yep.
A classic. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Julie, before we go, do something for me. Talk a little bit to some of the my parents of young adults who are in recovery, and see if you can give a little bit of out of your knowledge base, a little bit of help and prevention, and some things for them to think about as they unfortunately have to start this journey in helping the
Okay.
young one with a recovery.
Okay. So are you wanting me to talk to adults or are you wanting me to talk to parents? Because I know you work a lot with parents. What were you?
Sprinkle some both in. Let me feel what you feel.
Sure. Okay. I he would kind of ask me a little bit, and so I was thinking about what I would say to a parent
Yeah.
that has a child in recovery.
Mhm.
Um, first, drowning yourself in shame and blame for your child's struggles is never going to be the thing that helps them.
Right.
And I think it's so important for parents to understand that it's so easy to take on all of that responsibility and try to make it all our fault, and it's just not. So I would just encourage parents to really try not to shame themselves for where their child is. The other thing is do what you can to heal yourself as a
Mhm.
parent. Because if we all have trauma, we all come from experiences and struggles and difficulties and things that have affected us and caused us tremendous damage as kids, as teenagers, as adults. Heal yourself
Right.
as much as you can. Seek therapy, go to Al-Anon meetings, find people that you can talk to, because the more you heal yourself, the more you're going to be able to show up for your kid in the way that they need you to. And I think it's just so valuable that all of the people in a person's life, if they're in recovery, whether it's a youth or an adult, the more the people in their life work to heal themselves also, the better chance of success that person is going to have maintaining a recovery journey long term.
Very good. Julie, I want to thank you for coming on my show. And in the near future, I'm going to get your co-host on here so he can get up on the soapbox too. But I really appreciate you guys coming on and spreading your knowledge. I let everybody know that in the description of this show, we will have everything we can put about Julie through the Glass Recovery, their website. And I think I'm going to get you to send me something about that site that you joined to help
Hmm.
something, then anything that we can do to help these people in their journey. So,
Yeah,
Julie, again, thank you for coming on the soapbox and letting us know how you feel about recovery.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been
It's my
fun.
pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye bye, everybody.